American cops are supposed to protect us, but what happens when the people behind the badge turn in the criminals? These aren't just little slip-ups or bad days. We're talking cold-blooded betrayal and crimes from women who used to wear the blue. From staged hits to officers taking revenge, these stories are as dark as it gets. They show exactly how power can totally rot a person's soul. Tonight, we're looking at the most twisted female officers you've never heard of. Before we jump in, tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories go. Smash that subscribe button for more true crime. Let's get into the case of Ivonne Wu. It was October 13th, 2021, in a quiet Brooklyn spot called Bensonhurst. The sun was down and families were just settling in for dinner. Around 5 p.m., a frantic 911 call blew that piece apart. Someone was screaming about shots fired on 19th Avenue. When the boys in blue showed up, it was a night up. 2 women were down, 1 was gone. The other was barely hanging on. But the real kicker, it wasn't some street thug who pulled the trigger. The shooter wasn't a stranger or a career criminal. It was one of their own, an active NYPD officer named Ivonne Wu. On paper, Wu was a hero, 5 years on the force, working out of the 72nd Precinct. Her partners thought she was solid, disciplined, and totally reliable. She wore that shield with pride, like she really cared about the city. But inside, Wu was a ticking time bomb of raw emotion. The victims weren't random. One was Jenny Lee, Wu's ex-girlfriend. They'd broken up months ago, but Wu just couldn't let go while Jenny moved on. She was seeing Jamie Ling, a 24-year-old who everyone said was pure sunshine. Seeing them together ate Wu alive. It turned into a sick, obsessed love triangle. That October night, all that jealousy finally boiled over. Wu snuck into Jenny's place and waited. She was already inside when the couple walked in. Things went south fast. Wu pulled her service piece and started blasting. James died right there. Jenny was hit too, but she survived by a miracle. Neighbors heard the screams and the pops. Then it just went dead quiet. When the cops rolled up, they didn't have to hunt anyone down. Ivonne Wu was just standing there outside, totally calm and empty-handed. "I am the one who did it," she told them. Even the toughest detectives were floored by how cold she was. One of their own had just ended a life and tried to take another. As the dust settled, it was clear this wasn't just a sudden snap. It was a slow burn of a mind coming apart at the seams. She'd been stalking them, losing sleep over Jenny's new girl. The DA said this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment thing. It was a planned hit, a cold choice to erase the people she blamed for her pain. It gutted the NYPD. Seeing an officer use their training for a personal vendetta is a disaster. The department had to face the fact that they'd armed a monster. The legal battle dragged on. Wu was hit with heavy charges right out the gate. Fast forward to July 2024, and she finally took a deal. She copped to manslaughter and attempted murder, getting 27 years behind bars. Justice was served, but it won't bring James back to the family that misses her every day. Jenny Lee was stuck picking up the pieces of a broken life, while the PD dealt with a dirty insider. Now look at Kim Potter from Brooklyn Center. April 11th, 2021, in Brooklyn Center, just a typical Sunday afternoon. Things were chill. Neighbors were out, enjoying that standard spring weekend vibe. But 20-year-old Daunte Wright wouldn't see the sun go down that day. A basic traffic stop turned into a nightmare and a massive blow to public trust. Officer Kim Potter was the main player. On paper, she was a model cop. 26 years on the force, working her way up the ladder in Brooklyn Center. She coached rookies and ran training. People saw her as a cool-headed, respected pro. Her squad trusted her. No drama. To the neighborhood, she was the steady hand, a veteran who'd been through it all and, after 2+ decades on patrol, supposedly knew the ropes. That's why the fallout was such a total head-scratcher. Since underneath that shield in all those years, one split-second choice. One huge screw-up wrecked a family, a town, and what little faith people had. Daunte Wright knew the drill. 20 years old, just a kid finding his way. That Sunday, he's cruising with his girl when the lights flash behind him, pulled over for old tags and a little air freshener on the mirror. Small stuff, usually just a ticket or a quick warning from the cops. But a name check popped a warrant for missing a minor court date. That changed everything. Suddenly, a quick stop turned into an actual arrest. Enter Kim Potter. The body cam video shows the whole messy situation go down. When they tried to cuff him, Daunte broke loose and hopped back inside. Potter starts screaming the words that would haunt her. Taser, taser, taser. But she's holding her Glock, not a taser. One shot. Daunte crashes shortly after. He died right there. Potter's losing it on tape, saying, "I grabbed the wrong piece. I shot him." That phrase was her whole defense. And what made everyone furious, she swore it was an accident, saying she meant to pull her taser. Not her gun. People weren't buying it. She'd been on the job 26 years. She taught hundreds of rookies how to use gear and carried those weapons forever. Plus, every cop is drilled to know the basics by heart. Tasers on the left, guns on the right. They feel totally different. Weight and grip. One's neon yellow, the other's flat black. You really can't miss it. How does an expert mess that up? Was she panicking or something worse? Maybe she just couldn't tell the difference between helping and hurting anymore. For Daunte's folks, none of those excuses changed a single thing. Their kid was gone, killed by someone who was supposed to keep him safe. State investigators jumped in fast, but the streets were already on fire with rage. Protests hit Brooklyn Center, blowing up the whole debate on bad policing after Floyd. That tragedy happened just down the road in Minneapolis less than a year before. Potter turned in her badge within a few days. The chief quit too, but that wasn't enough. The DAF filed manslaughter charges. December 2021. Trial starts. The jury watches that shooting video on loop. They listen to policy pros, her former students, and then Potter herself. She was crying on the stand, swearing she never meant to hurt the kid and that this screw-up would haunt her for the rest of her life. Prosecutors didn't buy the accident story. After 26 years on the force, Kim Potter knew the drill. This wasn't a rookie move. It was a total abuse of power and a cold-blooded gamble with someone's life. Come December 2021, the jury nailed her on 2 counts of manslaughter. The judge handed down 2 years. To anyone watching, it felt like a slap on the wrist for a stolen life. By April 2023, after only 16 months behind bars, Potter was out, but the Rye fun noted get a release date. That hole in their lives is forever. For the rest of us, the message was loud and clear. Even when the system actually works and the jury says guilty, the time never seems to fit the crime. Potter's case pulled back the curtain on an ugly truth. That badge, which is supposed to mean protect and serve, can also be a get-out-of-jail-free card. One split-second panic or a single bad call ends lives the very people we're taught to look up to. The ones with the training, the ones on the payroll to keep us safe. They're the ones who can strip it all away. Kim Potter might be walking free now, trying to put her life back together, but Daunte Wright's name is permanently burned into her legacy. He didn't die because of a mistake. He died because of power gone wrong and a betrayal that rocked country. Next up, Christina Hamby, DeKalb County, Georgia. September 19th, 2018, nighttime in DeKalb County. It was quiet out by Wesley Hairston. Just street lights and shops locking up for the night. Just another boring commute for most folks. Headed home on a weeknight, then 11 p.m. hits, and everything goes sideways. 2 innocent people wiped out in seconds. And the person behind the wheel, not some street racer or a carjacker. It was Officer Christina Hamby, one of DeKalb County's finest. On paper, Hamby wasn't some dirty cop. She wasn't running some street gang or cutting shady deals. She was some criminal mastermind. She looked like any other beat cop in a uniform. Someone you'd trust with your neighborhood. Her coworkers thought she was solid and professional. That badge meant safety, but that September night, she made a choice that tore that trust to shreds in the worst way. The 2 women killed were Shirley Gibbs, 54, and Catherine Lewis, 68. They had families, friends, and whole lives ahead of them. They didn't know Adam. They weren't criminals. They weren't even looking for trouble. Just wrong place, wrong time. When a patrol car came screaming at them at a lethal speed, it all happened lethal speed. Hamby was pushing 74 miles per hour. That's double the 35-mile-per-hour limit. The kicker, she wasn't even responding to a 911 call. No lights, no sirens. She wasn't rushing to save anyone. Court docs show she was just driving like a maniac, ignoring the same laws she was supposed to be locking people for. Hamby hit the intersection and lost it. Her cruiser smashed into the victim's car so hard both women died. That quiet street turned into a graveyard of twisted metal and strobe lights. People standing around couldn't believe their eyes. A cop in uniform had just caused all this carnage. At first, it was pure chaos. When the backup arrived, they were floored to see one of their own was the one who did it. Usually, the cops are the ones protecting us from crazy drivers. This time, the protectors were what's word got out. People wanted blood. How does a trained pro drive like that? Why was she flooring it for no reason? The investigators started digging deep into what Hamby was actually doing. The tech guys went to work on the skid marks, the black box data, and the wreckage. After talking to witnesses, the truth was plain as day. Hamby was doing way over double the residential zone, putting everyone in the crosshairs. This wasn't some oops moment. This was criminal-level negligence. The die hit her with vehicular homicide, reckless driving, and failure to stay in her lane. In Georgia, vehicular homicide is as serious as it gets, especially when you're caught totally blowing off public safety. As the case moved forward, things got deplored. Cops get a ton of training on how to handle a car, especially at high speeds. Every cop knows the weight of that badge and those sirens. Hammy wasn't some green rookie who didn't rookie. She knew the stakes perfectly well, yet she still chose to floor it for no reason, gambling with love that weren't hers to lose. In the courtroom, the DA hammered that point home. This wasn't some freak accident or a stroke of bad luck. It was a total betrayal of everything she was trained to do. For the families of Shirley Gibbs and Catherine Lewis, the grief was just off the charts. Their people weren't taken by some street thug or a random tragedy. They were taken by a person in a uniform. The very system meant to keep the peace ended up bringing pure hell right to their front porch. During the sentencing, relatives talked about the massive hole in their lives, the birthdays and they'd now have to face alone. The gap between the hero image she projected and what she actually did couldn't have been wider. She was supposed to protect her. Instead, her being reckless just wiped two women off the map and tore their families to pieces. The jury found her guilty of vehicular homicide. She stood there in front of the judge as a convicted felon, not an officer of the law. That shield couldn't hide her anymore. She got her time, but for most folks, no amount of years in a sup for a life. Looking back at this whole mess, it's not just the high speeds or the wreckage that sticks with you. It's the way she spat on her responsibility. We give police officers a crazy amount of power. They carry guns, they lock people up, and they make calls every day that can change someone's world in a heartbeat. That power comes with a debt to the public, to respect life, follow the rules, and show some damn restraint. Christina Hammy threw that out the window the second she slammed her foot on the gas for no reason. She pushed that cruiser until it was a lethal weapon, and two innocent women ended up paying the deep price. Today, the memory of Shirley and Catherine serves as a loud reminder that everyone has to answer for their actions, even the ones in uniform. When a cop steps out of line, whether they meant to or were just being sloppy, they gotta own the gun. For the folks in DeKalb County, seeing those blue lights flash is always going to feel a little bitter after that September night. Those lights did mean help was on the way. They meant someone was gone forever. Take Alfreda Fluker from the Birmingham PD. It was the night of April 10th, 2020, in Burlingame. Most of the city was quiet, but inside one car pulled over on the shoulder. Things were going sass. Behind the wheel was Alfreda Fluker, a decorated veteran of the force. For over 15 years, people trusted her to hold the lines. Her job was to keep things cool in a crisis and protect people in one of the biggest cities in the seat. But that night, the protector turned into the hunter. Her story didn't just rattle Birmingham. It shocked the whole country. To the public, Detective Fluker was pro. She handled the toughest cases in the city. Her partners knew her as a straight shooter who did T2E nonsense. She walked with that I'm in charge vibe and had the shield and the years to back it up. But like every story about betrayal, what you saw on the surface was only half the truth. Behind closed doors, Fluker's life was a total mess of secrets, jealousy, and emotional drama. She was tangled up in a messy relationship with Mario White, another detective on the same force. That situation was anything but stable. Then there was Kenesha Fuller, a 43-year-old woman, just try-year-old her life. She'd recently started seeing Mario White too, and to Alfreda, Kenesha wasn't just some other woman. She was the enemy, the person standing in the way of the man Alfreda thought belonged only to her. This triangle of love and resentment was about hit a breaking point in the worst way possible. That night in April, Alfreda found out Mario and Kenesha were together. The news set her off, triggering nicks of pure rage and hurt. She tailed them through the streets of Birmingham until she finally spotted their car. A few minutes later, Under the cover of darkness, Alfreda rolled up to confront them. She should be taken a breath or just walked away, but she chose violence instead. She opened fire on the Knisha Fuller. The woman Alfreda saw as her rival did to stand a prayer. Mario made it out alive, but he was completely out alive. He had to watch while his own partner, someone he'd worked the streets with, turned into a killer right before his eyes. The gunfire ruined everything. A cop who swore an oath to save lives destroyed one in a single moment of madness. The Birmingham police did to play around. They put the cuffs on Alfreda almost immediately. For the cops who knew her, it was impossible to wrap their heads around. A veteran detective had just committed a crime she was paying to stop. Patrick Smith, the chief back then, went on record to the whole city. You could hear the sting of betrayal in his voice. This isn't about us, he said. It's about one person, stop choices. It hit home that wearing a badge doesn't stop someone from losing their mind or their soul. The detective work was basic, but the heartbreak it caused was massive. The physical proof put Alfreda right there. Mario White's story backed up the clock, and the ballistics matched her duty weapon. The DAS saw an open and shut case, but for the folks in Birmingham, it felt way more twisted than that. How does a veteran cop with all that training and a literal oath to protect let envy and fury burn everything down? This was some green rookie screwing up. This wasn't just a bad call on a high-stress night. This was cold, calculated, and deeply personal. When the trial finally kicked off, the world was still dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, making every horrific detail echo louder. The jury listened as the prosecution detailed how Alfreda stalked them before the final showdown. They heard the gut-wrenching story of Mario White watching a fellow officer, someone he actually should pull the trigger and trusted. Her lawyers claimed she just totally lost control, denying she meant it, but the jury wasn't buying it. In 2022, Alfreda went down for murder. The judge gave her life without any hope of parole. The city got its answer, but the why still haunts the street. Alfreda was supposed to be one of the good ones, a detective people looked up to, someone who wore that badge with honor. Instead, she turned into the exact criminal she was supposed to be locking up. For the Fuller family, the hole she left is never getting filled. They lost their girl, their world. No amount of prison time brings her back, and for Mario White, the mental scars run deep. He didn't just lose a partner. He is stuck with the nightmare of that night, tied to a woman he used to call a colleague. For the BPD, this whole mess was a brutal reality check that the blue suit doesn't guarantee a cell. To most cops, that shield means putting it all on the line for the public. But for Alfreda Fluker, it was just a front to hide the rage and instability that finally boiled over. This went way beyond a love triangle gone wrong. It was a middle finger to the oath, the Hui team. Alfreda Fluker is never walking free. She'll rot in a cell, facing the same hard time she used to give hers. But the stain she left on the badge, that's not washing off anytime soon. Take Antoinette Frank, no PD. It was the night of March 4th, 1995, in the Big Easy Kinmen, a quieting at Cuthamese joint, was having a normal night. Families sat around steaming bowls of soup. The vibe was totally relaxed. Nobody knew this local hangout was about to become the scene of blood-traded betrayal, New Orleans history. A hit so ruthless and calculated that it still makes people's blood run cold decades later. And the person behind the trigger wasn't some gangbanger off the corner. It was a cop in full unicorn. Her name was Antoinette Frank. On paper, Antoinette was exactly what the city wanted. Born in Louisiana in 1971. She hit the force in 93. She was young, hungry, and looked like a success story climbing the ranks in a tough town. People thought she was a pro. She had the look, the talk, and that badge that made everyone feel safe. She played the part of the protector so well that the folks at Kimmen basically treated her like a sister. The owners let her hang out behind the counter and move through their private rooms like she lived there. That was the mask Antoinette wore, but under that crisp blue shirt, she was rotting inside. The Wu family, who ran the place, went out of their way for her. They fed the local cops, and Frank was a regular fix. But after a while, the family started getting a bad vibe. She started acting like she owned the joint, throwing her weight around. Even so, the Vus never imagined turn into a killer. Working that shift were the owner's kids, Ivonne Wu, along with her younger brother Kong and sister. They looked at Antoinette and saw a friend. They thought that shield on her chest meant she hadn't. The trust was about to be blown to pieces. That night on March 4th, Frank walked in with her wrote-in Euro Rogers Akais. This kid was already bad news, a small-time hustler always looking for a score. Frank and Laz were plotting how to get rich quick, their target, the very place that treated Frank friendly. Witnesses said Frank was hanging around there earlier that night, checking things out, basically scouting the joint. Later on, she comes back with lakas, but not lakas. She was an intruder. They demanded the cash and robbed the place, but then Frank did something truly cold. Out back, another officer named Ronald Williams was working a security side gig when they gunned him down. 2 of the us were murdered there. That night, Frank didn't just end lives. She murdered the trust between the people and the police. At first, nobody could believe a cop was behind something so twisted. The surviving us, including a little girl who hid, pointed the finger straight at Frank. They told the cops everything, her face, her voice. She was there. The betrayal was just unreal. A woman they used to feed was now the prime suspect in a cold-blooded hit. As the investigation heated up, the proof became undeniable. There was no explaining away Frank's badge being right there at the scene. The witnesses and her link to Lakaz told the whole story. This wasn't some robbery gone wrong. This was a planned hit fueled by greed. Detectives figured out the timeline in no time. The tapes and the family's accounts all lined up perfectly. Her boyfriend Lakaz was reckless, but Frank knew the restaurant inside and out. She knew the schedule and the layout. The trial that followed was a total media circus. Seeing a female cop on trial for murder really shook the whole city. The DEA called her a predator who used her badge to get clothes before striking. Her lawyers tried to blame Lakaz, but the evidence was just too heavy. The jury did to see some rookie who just got mixed up with the wrong people. They saw a person who trashed the badge in the worst way possible. In 1995, Frank was convicted for the murders of Officer Williams and the Wu siblings. She got the death penalty, which is super rare for a female officer in the States. Her partner, Rogers Lakaz, also got sentenced to death, though they later gave him life. Today, Frank is still on death row waiting for the end. What makes this whole case so terrifying? It's the cold planning. Unlike most cops who panic, Frank knew exactly what she was doing. She used the badge as a mask to get paid. The motive was just pure greed, money and power. But folks think she just had a deep hate for authority. She loved crossing lines and was drawn to the criminal life she was supposed to stop. It is a harsh reminder that the uniform does not always tell you who is underneath. New Orleans felt that backstab deep. Officer Williams was a hero. He was executed by one of his own. The us lost their kids in their own home, and the whole neighborhood learned a lesson they will never forget. Sometimes the ones sworn to protect are the biggest threat. The restaurant never opened again. Those locked doors are a ghost of the night. Trust was violently shattered. Sherry Hall, Jackson PD. It was September 13th, 2016. In a quiet Georgia town, a frantic call came over the radio after midnight. A cop claimed she had been jumped on patrol and barely made it out alive. That was Sherry Hall, a rookie. The story she told was enough to freak anyone out. She said she pulled into a dark dead end known for trouble. She claimed a man jumped out of the shadows and just started shooting. She told dispatch her vest saved her life. Within minutes, the whole department knew. Squad cars flew through the night, sirens screaming into the darkness. They believed a fellow officer had barely escaped with her life, so the search began immediately. Hall wasn't your average cop then. She was the face of community policing, a girl looking to make a real difference in a small Georgia town. People liked her. She was professional, chill, and totally dedicated to her work. She had only been with the Jackson police for a few months, but her vibe was that of someone totally dedicated to safety. On the news, Hall looked stone-cold tough, playing the part of a survivor who stared down a deli tack. To the locals, she was pure guts, a woman ready to take a bullet just to keep everyone else safe. But there was a shadow behind that badge, something that would eventually wreck her whole career. Her name and her freedom. In this case, the victim wasn't just one person, it was the entire town. When Hall told her story, she pinned it on a black man, giving a very specific description of him. That one accusation set the town on fire. spreading fear and bad blood everywhere. Innocent guys became targets in a fake hunt that never should have happened. Plus, Hall's lies made the officers she worked with, they ran into the line of fire, thinking a shooter was still out there, thinking their friend had almost died right there on the dark pavement. Her lie trashed their trust and risked their lives. At first, her whole story actually sounded pretty convincing to them. Cops saw she'd fired her weapon. Her vest was even torn up, exactly like the story she told about being shot that night. The whole department went into war mode. Roadblocks were everywhere. They were hitting doors, and within hours, the local news was screaming about a cop getting tarred for murder. Hall was on camera, talking about staring down evil and surviving, a lone female officer being targeted. That stirred up a massive wave of anger across Georgia. But once the detectives really started digging, her story started falling apart. Forensics found the first glitch. When they checked her bulletproof vest, the analysts saw something weird. The marks showed the shot was point blank, not from an attacker standing way back in the dark shadows. Ballistics made it worse. They figured out the slug in her vest came from her very own department-issued gun, the one she was carrying that night. The lies just kept coming. Hall's radio logs and the timing didn't match the tales she told. Nobody saw her mystery man, and the local cameras didn't show any sign of a suspect running away from that scene. All the hero cop's story was quickly turning into a total work of fiction right before their eyes. When they pushed for details, Hall started changing things up. At first, she swore she was jumped in the shoot. Then, faced with the ballistics, she claimed her memory was suddenly getting a bit fuzzy. But eventually, the facts were clear. Hall had faked the entire thing. She shot her own vest and called it in like a real attack. Why she did it? Well, that is still one of the most talked about parts of this case. Some think she just wanted the spotlight. Maybe she was trying to get a promotion by acting like a hero. Others think she was just struggling mentally. The fallout was absolutely brutal. Her lie put innocent people in danger and fueled racial hate, using stereotypes just so she could get ahead and look like a survivor. By 2017, they had enough dirt to bury her. She was busted for lying, faking evidence, and breaking her oath of office in court. The deed painted a very clear and ugly picture for the jury. Hall had turned her back on her partners and the whole town. They showed how she wasted police resources and sparked fear. Her lawyers claimed she was just under way too much just back then, saying she was in a bad place and acted out of desperation, not because of hate. The jury wasn't having it. They found her guilty and sent her straight to the big house. The woman they called a hero was now just a symbol of lies and disgrace for everyone. Mary O'Callaghan, La PUC. It was the night of July 22nd, 2012, down in South Los Angeles. The block was dead silent, but Alicia Thomas was losing her mind inside her home. She was fighting personal demons most of us could handle, which led to a heartbreaking choice to the local precinct. That night, she was hoping the law could shield her kids, since she was barely hanging on. It was a total Hail Mary fueled by love, but it triggered a nightmare that cost her everything. Right in the middle of this mess was Mary O'Callaghan, a 20-year vet with the NYPD. For 2 decades, she wore that badge like a shield of honor, supposedly the gold standard of law and order. Put her in those blues, and she looked like the definition of a straight-shooting cop. But under the surface, she was a different story. Her partners knew her as a short-fused, hard-no-fused. Nobody guessed she'd eventually flip the script on justice and trash her entire legacy in one night. Alicia Thomas wasn't some street-hardened thug or a danger to the public. She was just a 35-year-old mom drowning in her own head, fighting demons and trying to and fight. When the cruisers pulled up that night, it wasn't for a shootout. It was because a mother was falling apart. She was messed up, sure, but she was still trying to do right by her babies. This should have been a textbook arrest, a quick ride to the station, and some much-needed help. Instead, things went south. The cops showed up and decided to haul her in for child endangerment. Thomas didn't fight. She dropped her kids off and let them slap the cuffs on her. She headed toward the squad car. But that's when everything started spiraling out of control. Officer O'Callaghan rolled up and jumped right into the middle of it while a terrified Thomas started panicking. She was pinned down and losing it, and that's exactly when O'Callaghan took things way too far. Bystanders saw it, But the dash cam was the one that caught the ugly truth. O'Callahan didn't try to de-escalate. She threw respect out the window and went straight for the handed stuff. She kicked and kneed a woman who couldn't even move, beating her until Alicia just crumpled to the ground. A few hours later, she was dead. People couldn't believe a cop supposed to save lives just destroyed a woman in a dun-dun. This wasn't just about the hits. It was a total slap in the face to public trust. You call the police when you at rock bottom because you expect a helping hand. Alicia trusted the system to save her kids, but that same system ended up taking her life instead. The NYPD couldn't look away from the tape showing O'Callahan brutalizing a woman who couldn't turn. They benched her, and then the DA came knocking with some serious charges. But it wasn't an open and shut case. Pinning the death directly on her actions was going to be a legal nightmare. The coroners couldn't be specific, labeling the cause of death as undetermined in the final report. Between her health and some substances, there was enough doubt to keep homicide charges off the table. However, the video made one thing clear as day. She'd committed a brutal assault under the cover of a badge. By 2015, after a long legal slog, the jury handed down a conviction while two viviferous toed. Her lawyers tried to say she was just a hard-charging cop, handling a suspect who wouldn't quit. They claimed she was just managing the chaos, but the prosecution had the tapes to prove otherwise. The footage showed those kicks were pure aggression against a woman who was already cuffed and posed. The jury didn't buy the defense, finding O'Callahan guilty of felony assault. She got 3 years, but thanks to the rules, she was out in less. This wasn't just some random stacked crime. It's a wake-up call about what happens when power-tripping cops use their authority to hurt instead of hurt. No court ruling was ever going to bring Alicia back to the kids, who now have to grow up without her. Those kids are scarred for life, and the NYPD took another massive hit to its already shaky reputation. A scandal like this doesn't just trash one officer's career. It poisons the well for every decent cop who's actually out there doing the right thing. It reminds us that a badge does make you a saint, and once that trust is gone, you can't just it. The O'Callahan disaster leaves us with some pretty ugly questions to answer. How many other victims are suffering in the dark, where the cameras can't see them? And how do we actually make these people pay when they stab the public in the back? This ain't just about one bad apple. It's that razor-thin gap between having juice and stray abusing it. If you've stuck around this long, I'd love to hear your take on this. Drop a comment with your city and local time. If you're down for more gritty crime deep dives, hit that subscribe button to catch more stories about backstabbing, dirty laundry, and the scandals they keep under wraps. Valerie Cincinnelli, NYPD. May 2019, Long Island. Federal agents swarmed a woman who'd sworn to protect and serve. Her name was Valerie Cincinnelli, a New York cop and mom who looked like a total pro. But behind the scenes, she was hatching a plan that would gut the public's trust. Everyone saw her. She hit the force in 2007, earning a rep for being nails tough and never backing down from the city's chaos. Neighbors saw a girl who'd really made it big. To other cops, she was a sister in arms, standing right there on that thin blue line. Nobody saw the mess inside. Her marriage was toast, a brutal custody war, or kept the pressure cooker. And that hate for her ex started turning into something way more twisted and dangerous. She had two specific people in her crosshairs, her ex-husband and, even worse, his teenage kid. This wasn't just a messy divorce anymore. Valerie was ready to do unthinkable and have them both wiped off the map forever. Her grudge turned into a full-blown obsession. By early 2019, she was looking for a way out. It started with quiet talk. She vented to her boyfriend, some guy named John. She brought up cash and finding a fixer for her ex. Then, she added the kid to the hit, but she played it sloppy and picked the wrong guy. John went straight to the feds. He spilled everything. From then on, every word she breathed was being caught on tape. The FI told John to keep the conversation going. He did, recording her as she mapped out the hit. Valerie agreed to drop $7,000 when she wanted the teenager gone too. The feds knew they were dealing with a monster. They needed the smoking gun, so they faked the whole scenario. They showed her pics of her ex dead in his car. It was all staged, but she bought it. When she saw the photos, she didn't blink. No tears, no regret. Investigators say her cold-blooded reaction was the final nail in her coffin. She thought she'd pulled off a double hit. She didn't realize she was talking herself into a cell. May 17, 2019, the handcuffs finally came out for Valerie. Feds moved in once they had proof the hit for hire was the real deal. Word traveled fast. People were floored. A city cop, badge and all, tried to take out her family. The arrest rattled the whole department and the neighborhood she used to patrol. It was the ultimate betrayal of her oath. Everyone asked the same thing: why? She wasn't some street criminal. She was broke. She had a solid career with the biggest police force in the country. But her own bitterness and that toxic marriage just ate her alive until she snapped. Instead of just walking away or fighting it out in court, she crossed the Rubicon. She let hate turn into a conspiracy. In court, the mountain of evidence against her was impossible to ignore. The tapes, the fake crime scene pics, and her boyfriend's word. It all pointed to one thing. She didn't just dream this up. She actively tried to make it happen. Initially, she faced a heavy murder for hire charge, but things shifted as the trial moved forward. She eventually took a plea for messing with the investigation by trashing evidence. November 2021, she got handed 48 months in the federal pen. Some say she got off easy considering the crime, but it killed her career and branded her a traitor to the blue forever. The way she crossed that line is what really haunts people today. You had a cop with a badge planning a hit in the shadows. It made folks doubt the whole system, not just him. Nost her for the victims. The nightmare didn't end in court. Jacqueline Villa Seenor, Chicago Police Department. It was 2004 in Chicago, a city where the badge was supposed to mean something. But things got messy behind the uniform. Wasn't he just a woman with a bad marriage? She was cooking up a backstab. Jacqueline Villa Seenor, a Chicago beat cop. Instead of doing things by the book, she tried to rig the system she once protected. On the outside, she was a solid officer. Partners called her sharp, a real pro who always kept her cool. She was just another face on patrol, blending right into the Chicago streets. To her neighbors, she was just a mom juggling a stressful job and family life. But nobody saw the storm brewing under the surface. Her marriage hit the rocks, and things with her ex got ugly. Money, kids, and pure hate. Stuff that should be stayed in court took a dark, twisted turn. Her ex-husband was the target. They used to be a team, but now it was war. The bitterness ate her alive until it turned into a straight-up obsession. To her, he wasn't just an ex anymore. He was the enemy. Forget the oath. She started planning something way more cold-blooded. It all went south when she crossed a line no cop should ever touch. She went looking for a trigger man to take him out permanently. This wasn't just talk or venting. It was a business deal with cold hard cash. She didn't realize she was leaving breadcrumbs everywhere. Every word was being tracked. This wasn't a wife snapping. This was a calculated hit she was trying to bankroll. That kind of secret doesn't stay buried for long. Word got out, and suddenly the cop was the one under the microscope. The feds treated her just like any other street-level thug. They wired up the room and watched every move until the truth came out. She wasn't just blowing off steam. The tapes proved she was dead serious. It wasn't a heat-of-the-moment thing. It was a cold, hard choice. A cop, someone paid to protect us, was caught setting up a murder for revenge. Once the proof was locked in, the law moved in. The courts confirmed the horror. Jacqueline Villa Seenor, a sworn officer of the law, had tried to hire a killer. In court, the whole ugly truth came out. No mystery here, just a betrayal. They hit her for using her training for evil. She knew the law and the stakes, but she pulled the trigger anyway. Her lawyers talked about stress and a broken heart, trying to get sympathy. But the jury couldn't get past her throwing away her badge. What's chilling is the contrast. Cops are supposed to de-escalate these fights. She knew exactly how bad these domestic cases get, yet she did it. She took her power and turned it into a deadly weapon for a grudge. It makes you wonder, how does a protector justify breaking the law like this? Was it ego, payback, or did she think the badge made her untouchable? Villa Seenor finally went down. The Illinois Appeals Court officially shut her case. For her ex, the trial was a nightmare. His biggest enemy was his wife. For the Chicago boys in blue, this was a black eye. It proves monsters don't just hide in shadows. Sometimes they re-wearing the shield, and the authority we're supposed to trust. When the badges break bad, it doesn't just rattle the neighborhood. It guts the whole system. How do you live with that level of betrayal? Let me know your thoughts. Which case was the most cold-blooded? Did they get what they deserved? Comment below. For more deep dives into the dark side every single day, hit subscribe and that bell. We've got more stories that'll make you paranoid. Until then, stay safe and stay sharp. See you in the next. Home is supposed to be the safest place on earth. The one place where you lock the door and finally breathe easy. But for Christine dear, for Tammy, for Leslie, for Kristen, home was exactly where the danger lived, and it wore a familiar face. It drove the same car. It sat across the dinner table. It said, "I love you." The cases in this film aren't just horror stories, they are urgent warnings. Because the monsters in these stories didn't look like monsters at all. One was a wealthy developer with a mansion and a perfect social image. Another was a clean-cut young man who charmed an entire neighborhood. On the surface, successful, respectable, the last person anyone would suspect. And that is precisely the point. Evil doesn't always announce itself. It builds a reputation first. It earns your trust before it destroys you. So what do we do with that truth? We get honest about the signs we tend to ignore. Coercive control, isolation from friends and family, explosive anger behind closed doors. Financial manipulation, making you feel like you can't survive without them. These are not small red flags. These are the earliest chapters of the same dark story. If someone in your life makes you feel afraid in your own home, that is not normal. That is not normal. Love does not leave bruises. Love does not silence you. Love does not own you. And if you see a friend pulling away, going quiet, making excuses for someone who scares them, don't look away, ask the question, stay close, be the person they can run to. Because the hardest part of leaving isn't the door, it's believing someone will catch you and will catch you on the other side. These cases also taught law enforcement some of the most important lessons in Canadian history. They exposed gaps in how domestic abuse was reported, investigated, and taken seriously. They forced entire systems to change because victims deserved better than they got, and the families left behind, they never stopped carrying the weight of what was taken from them. They became advocates. They pushed for stronger laws, better protections, faster responses. Their grief didn't break them. It became a force that protected strangers they would never even meet. That is the real legacy of these cases, not the monsters, but the people who refuse to be silenced. If you or someone you know is in an unsafe relationship, reach out, tell someone, get help. Because your life is worth fighting for, and you do not have to fight alone. The truth needs telling, and so does this. You are not trapped. There is always a way out. Remember the names, honor the lives, and carry this lesson forward every single day.